So in this lesson, we'll understand Microsoft Azure. So what exactly an Azure and what kind of services it provides and what are the benefits of using Azure. So in the last session, we discussed about the cloud computing. So we understood the benefits of the cloud data center. Just to recap, the cloud data centers are self-service data centers. So where users can interact with the data center over the browser or the internet, and they can create the resources like the virtual machine, storage, network, firewalls, routers, deploy applications on like web servers like Tomcat, Apache, IIS web servers, and use like SQL Server applications. Okay. So the self-service data center is nothing but what we call it as a cloud data centers. Now, what is this Microsoft Azure? So Microsoft Azure is a public cloud basically offered by Microsoft. So Microsoft has built cloud data centers. So they have a lot of data centers which are being built across the globe. So we'll discuss in the next lesson about that infrastructure. So like in India, we have multiple data centers in Chennai, Mumbai, and Pune. Similarly like that, so Microsoft has built a lot of cloud data centers across the globe and offering to the public. So what does it mean by public cloud? As we discussed earlier, anybody can use it. So what I mean by anybody means any authorized person who is eligible, who are valid to use the cloud services, they can basically use the cloud services by verifying themselves that is an authorized user or a valid user on this internet. It provides so infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. So in the cloud models, or I would say called as in cloud service types, service models, we discussed about the infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, SaaS software as a service. So Azure is primarily provides an infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. So the Microsoft Azure does not provide you software as a service. So where Microsoft has another cloud called as an 365 cloud. So that 365 cloud will provide a SaaS cloud services. But when it comes to the Azure, it provides infrastructure as a services and platform as a services. We'll try to understand what kind of services it provides. Then it has a global presence. So what does it mean by global presence? Now the data centers are being built across the various parts of the world. Now the customers who are in India, they can use the cloud data centers in India. The customers are basically the users who are there in US, they can use the US data centers. The users who are there in basically the customers who are there in UK, they can use the UK data centers. So Microsoft has built a lot of data centers, which we call them as a global presence. I would say more than 60 plus regions are covered by Microsoft. A region is basically a geographical region, like we can say call it as India as a geographical region, or South India is a geographical region. So like Microsoft has covered more than 60 plus regions are covered. And Microsoft is still building a lot of data centers across the globe. We might have seen some news in the Facebook or public internet that Microsoft has data centers under the ocean, under the sea. Yes, they have built a few of the data centers under the sea. And yes, few of the data centers are on the land. Okay. As we go on, we might understand, but that is what we see called as in the Microsoft has built a lot of data centers. Okay. So it is primarily a public cloud. Anybody can consume and use it. And that provides infrastructure as a service and a platform as a service. And Azure is basically a global presence. It means it is available across the globe and more than 60 plus regions available are basically covered. Now, what kind of services will be provided by Azure? As part of the Azure infrastructure as a services, when I see called as Azure infrastructure as a services. So when I look at Azure infrastructure as a service, we're calling infrastructure as a service. Now we'll take a simple business case. Now we are buying in, or basically we want to implement an SAP software for our organization. Now, in order to deploy the SAP application, I need servers, I need operating system, I need database applications, I need connectivity, internet, then I need network, I need firewall, like a simple, I would say, called as an application. An application. So to deploy an application, we need many things like the server, we need a storage, we need a backup, we need a network, we need internet connectivity, we need a firewall to secure the communication, we need a monitoring, like etc. etc. There are so many components which you require to deploy an application. And in order to ensure high availability, you might need like a load balancer, okay, and a lot of security products and everything. Now, as part of an Azure infrastructure as a service, so Microsoft provides something called as a compute, as a category called as a compute. So under this compute, primarily, they provide called as a virtual machines and called as in containers. Called as in containers. So today we see called as in microservices applications, micro service architecture based applications, they deployed in the containers. It's just like a virtual machine or a kind of a server, which can run an isolated application. So they, as part of the Azure infrastructure as a service, so Microsoft will provide a compute platform where you can create virtual machines, containers. Then it provides an network where we can deploy, create our own network. We can have our own routers. We can have our firewalls. We can have our own load balancers. We can have our own called as an application gateways, like etc. 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 It provides a lot of basically services as part of the network. So we can create our own network on top of the Azure data center. We can create a routers. They can deploy firewalls to secure the communication. We can have load balancers to distribute the traffic across multiple virtual machines. Then we can have an application gateway to secure the application from an application threats like that. Then it provides a storage as part of the infrastructure as a service. So what is that storage? You have disks. So you're creating a virtual machine. You need additional disks. The one virtual machine required in a 3 to 4 disks based on the application to the application. You need a file server to store all your files or application files. You need some kind of a storage where the users can dump the files and share with customers and many things. And you need a storage to back up your data. Now you have 20 virtual machines created on Azure. Now you have to ensure that there is a backup available. Now you need a storage capacity. So as part of infrastructure as a service, so the Azure will provide storage services basically called as in disks, will provide called as in file shares, something called as in queues, called as in blobs, like it provides many storage solutions, which is for many things. Then it provides security, infrastructure like an identity. So how does the users are going to interact with Azure? So they need some kind of an identity and identity protection, a multi-factor authentication, conditional based policies, like many things it provides, which is as part of the security, then called as a defender, which is like an antivirus, which basically can protect your virtual machines, applications, and the network storage and everything which is deployed in Azure. Then it provides called as a backup services, backup and recovery services, recovery as services. So it provides like and where you can have a backup your virtual machines, backup your applications. Okay, then you can store that backups for like a monthly, yearly, and it allows you to store that backups for a couple of years based on your requirement. And any given point of time, if there is some issue, which you can basically restore it, it provides an restore services. Then it provides called as a monitoring services. So what is this monitoring services? Now, if virtual machine goes down, how do we know that the virtual machine is down? How do we know that there is a firewall is down? How do we know that someone has changed the size of the virtual machine? Someone deleted a file in a storage. Some user password got expired. Now backup job got failed. How do we come to know that if something, a deviation happens within the particular, the resources what we created in Azure? So that's fair. So Microsoft will provide called as a monitoring services where customers can basically implement monitoring services, basically called as in like in capacity monitoring, like in utilization monitoring, availability monitoring. Okay, we can monitor availability, we can monitor the security, like etc. etc. Capacity is like in particular what is the capacity which is being allocated, which is being used to the optimized utilization. Like if the CPU utilization goes up to the 80%, then we want to get notified. If memory utilization goes to the 100%, we want to get notified. Like availability, if VM goes down, we want to get notified. Okay, and security, like if some user password got compromised, we want to get alert. If there is some kind of an virus threat, we want to be get alerted. So as part of the infrastructure as a services, it provides primarily like in compute, a network, storage, security, backup, and recovery services, then monitoring a services part of it. There are many other services, but I say now, if you look at now from a perspective of application, if I deploy an application in Azure, so I have a server. So Azure is providing a compute where I can create a virtual machine. It provides a storage where I can have multiple disks and file shares. It can provide a backup feature where if I deployed a couple of virtual machines, I can enable the backup, wherein Azure can take the backup of the virtual machines at regular intervals of time. It provides a network. So internet connectivity, public IP addresses, then you can have set up our own network. Then internet connectivity provides as part of network. Then firewall as part of the network. So you can use the Azure firewall and secure your network and your applications. And it provides monitoring. So when you create virtual machines on Azure and deploy the application, you can enable the monitoring services and you can basically monitor the availability, capacity, utilizations, and everything and get automatic alerts based on the thresholds which we configure it. Like this, the Azure provides a lot of other services as part of the infrastructure as a service. Now, when you look at Azure platform as a service, Now, as we discussed, Azure is an infrastructure as a service and platform as a services. Now, as part of the platform as a services, it provides called as a web apps, or we call it as an app services. So what is this app services? It is ready to use a platform. We can simply upload our application and run the application, either like a Java based application or a PHP based application or Python based application or a .NET based application. So we don't need to create a virtual machine, then install the .NET application framework, then install IIS and do all these things. It's not required. If there is an application which is developed in .NET, as you can simply create an app service, the backend Microsoft will have a server associated with that. An IIS being deployed or a Python is being deployed or a PHP is being deployed. If we simply upload the application into an app service and we start using it. So that is our application. It is not provided by Microsoft. Similarly called as in mobile apps, mobile application services. So if there are some kind of a development which is being done mobile applications, then it can provide that as part of the platform as a services. Like in content delivery networks. Content delivery network. What is this content delivery network? So content delivery network is something cache content. Now we, on a regular basis, we watch YouTube videos. So when we watch YouTube videos, so the content is being basically cached on the internet. So it doesn't go to the actual server and get download. Now content delivery networks are basically small kind of data centers, which is going to cache the content and deliver to the users. Now, if I'm using some kind of and watching some video on internet in YouTube, it goes to the nearest cache center, and from there I get access to the download. Okay, that way it can reduce the load on the server and give a better experience to the users. Then it provides like in database services, database applications, like your Oracle, like MS SQL, okay, or an MySQL or a NoSQL. Like there are so many database kind of an applications which are existing. So this Azure platform as a service will provide okay, a database applications ready to use. So I want a SQL Server database. I don't need to deploy a virtual machine, then install a SQL application, then create it. So I go to the platform as a service and I choose MS SQL, and Microsoft will automatically deploy a server in the backend and allocate the necessary resources in the backend, and it will try to basically migrate the basic process to create the SQL database. Like we can have our own databases. Okay. Only thing is that here we don't need to manage the SQL application performance or everything. So backend Microsoft will take care of the availability, backups, performance, and everything. We simply create our databases and we connect our applications to the database and use it. So what are these part of this? As we discussed in a platform as a services, we don't need to maintain the OS. We don't need to maintain the underlying network connectivity. We don't need to manage the underlying application, whatever the virtualization. We don't need to manage the I would say hosting platform, or basically called as middleware applications. We simply deploy our applications, configure it, and start using it like this. There are so many platform as a services, platform as services are being provided as part of the Microsoft Azure, as part of the Microsoft Azure. Okay, so there are so many other services like SAP, like Oracle apps, and Oracle platform as a services. Okay, we would say called as a big data on Azure. Like there are so many services are being provided as part of the platform as a service. Okay. Like this, primarily as part of the infrastructure as a services, Okay, and infrastructure as a service and a platform as a service. These are the kind of services at a high level they are being provided. Okay. Now, what benefits we get from the Azure? What are the benefits of using Azure? From so of using Azure cloud. So one is then no upfront cost. So what is that no upfront cost? I don't need to pay anything to Microsoft before using it. I simply need to create an account in Azure and start using it. Now, if you go back to the normal, if you want to buy a server, you have to pay to the hardware vendor and you have to get the server, then you can use that. Once you purchase the server, whether you use it, whether you don't use it, it is you paid it. But in the Azure, what happens? No upfront cost. You don't need to pay anything to the Microsoft to use Azure at the before itself. Pay only for what you use. Pay only for what you use. It is called as an pay as you go. So you might have heard about terminology called as a pay as you go. So what does that mean by pay as you go? Means you pay based on the usage. Based on the usage. Okay. If you are creating a virtual machine and you are using that virtual machine for a period of 4 hours, you pay for 4 hours. You're using a storage of 1 terabyte, you pay for only 1 terabyte. And that too, if you're using it for 10 days, you pay for only 10 days. You don't need to pay for the entire month or anything. How long you use it, you pay only for that. And the moment you change the capacities, like you have a virtual machine from a 4 processors with 16 GB RAM from last 10 days. Now you upgraded that from 4 process to 8 process and 32 GB RAM. The moment you upgrade, from that moment itself, it basically charges you for the new capacity. Either it is a lesser capacity or higher capacities. Then basically no termination fees. At any point of time, if you feel that, okay, it is not required, we can simply delete it. For something, I'm learning something. So I created a virtual machine and I was just playing with that for a couple of hours. The moment I do that, I don't need that machine. So I simply delete it. So I use that machine for only for a period of 4 hours. I pay for only 4 hours, but for the termination, I don't need to pay for it. That means that I'm not telling Microsoft that I'm going to use this for a 3 months or a 6 months. Okay. I use it for 4 months. I delete it. No termination fees at all. Okay. So that's the basically advantages of using Azure Cloud. There are so many from a technical point of it, from an we don't want to, I don't want to go into that. What are the benefits of Azure virtual machines and everything? At a high level, what we get called as in the benefits, and like in you have data centers nearby. Now, as Microsoft Azure has a lot of data centers around the region, you can use the data center which is nearby to your users. And Microsoft provides called as in basically an a scale your applications across the data centers. Now, what happens if the Microsoft, one of the data center goes down? My virtual machines are running there. My storage is there. Now my application will go down if the virtual machine goes down in the data center. Now Microsoft will provide a features wherein you can replicate your virtual machine from one data center of Azure to another data center of Azure. It is by any chance, for any reasons, if the virtual machines or the data center goes down, you can bring the other virtual machine up and running, which is there in the another data center. That's the basically kind of benefits what we get using. So we don't need to build a DR data centers because it is provided by Microsoft. We have to use the data centers and configure our applications and virtual machines, compute and network to ensure that if one of the Microsoft data center goes down, our applications can be available on the other Microsoft data centers. And Microsoft will provide a pricing calculator. So what is this pricing calculator? We really don't know how much it is going to cost us. We really don't know how much it is going to cost us. So what does that mean by it? Okay, I'm creating a virtual machine, but I don't know how much it is going to cost me. So after using it for 10 days, if Microsoft says that it is going to cost you $1,000, then it is going to be a surprise. Now, before we start using the Azure services, Microsoft will provide a tool called as a pricing calculator. And we can check how much it is going to cost us. So as we can see, called as an virtual machines, storage accounts, SQL databases, app services, Cosmos DB, like compute, network, storage, web, mobile, containers, databases. So I can go to the virtual machine. Go here. Now you can select in which particular region you want to have it. And Windows operating system, what type of OS, or you want to have an application inside. Tire, like as we go on, we might basically select this one. And you see 8 CPU, 2 CPUs with 8 GB RAM. You select it, 8 cores with 16 GB RAM, and how many hours in a month you are going to run. Are you going to run the all the days in a month, or you're going to run, let's say 40 hours in a month? Then you can basically specify 40 hours. At the down, you can see called as how much it is going to cost. So it's going to cost you like in $365 a month, which includes your connectivity, okay, and the disks, then whatever the OS disk and operating system license, then what you call this in the hardware capacities, which are being the case, and basic security features and everything are being included into this one. So before we deploy, you can basically go to the pricing calculator and you can verify it. Now, how would you pay to the Microsoft? So what type of basically payment options are available? And I would say called as in a payment options, or I would say called as in a billing options. Billing options. Now one is an, so you go for a pay as you go model, and through using your credit card. So what happens here now for a wire transfer? Some kind of features. A pay as you go, credit card or wire transfer. Now, what is this pay as you go? How much we're going to consume at the end of the month? Microsoft will charge a credit card, and basically we have to clear the invoice will be generated on our company name or whatever the name which we registered during the creation of the Azure account. Then it's going to charge. Or Microsoft will provide a feature where we do called as a bank transfer, which is called as a wire transfer. So at the end of the month, on a specific date every month, Microsoft will generate an invoice. And in the invoice, there will be a bank details provided by Microsoft with all the taxes and information and calculations. So we have to transfer that to that particular account. Then automatically Microsoft will update the billing details in our portal. Now, second method, pay as you go. Go with Microsoft reseller, or we can say called as a partner, Microsoft partner. Now, Microsoft has a lot of partners who are going to sell these cloud services. So in this case, what happens is the invoice will be generated to the partner. Partner will generate an invoice to us. So we pay to the reseller. Reseller will pay to the Microsoft. Due to some regulatory requirement, okay, in some countries, Microsoft services are not available, and due to regulatories, now they have to go through only the local reseller. In such kind of situations, I can basically go to the Microsoft reseller and I say that I want to use Azure Cloud Services. Can you provide me a subscription? So Microsoft reseller will create a subscription, give it to you. At the end of the day, Microsoft will raise the invoice to a reseller or a partner, and partner will raise the invoice to us. We pay to the partner and partner will pay to this one. This is pay as you go model, which is Microsoft release. Another kind of things called as an enterprise agreement with a what's it called as an agreement. What is this means? So I go to the Microsoft and say that, hey, this year I'm going to use 600 virtual machines of this kind of capacity, this much amount of storage, this capacity of backup, this capacity of storage, this capacity of near security products, and all the blah, blah, blah. We go to Microsoft, says that I need a best discount. Can you give it to me? I need a best support. Now we directly enter into an agreement with Microsoft, says that, okay, you are free to use these capacities. So we agree to certain resources, and Microsoft says that you are free to use up to this capacity, and monthly basis you pay me this much. That's it. Or yearly you pay me this much. Hey, for this entire year you pay me 2 crores and use this capacity. Now in this case, what happens is we don't need to bother about the monthly usage of the resources, because we agreed with Microsoft to certain capacities and we can use up to that capacity. If we go beyond that capacity, Microsoft will alarm us saying that, hey, you are exceeding your capacity and you also have some buffer. So you can use up to that buffer, but if you cross that buffer, then Microsoft may charge you. Okay. But the advantage of this enterprise agreement is you get a better discount, like a 40% to 50% discount from Microsoft directly. And we pay directly to the Microsoft either on a monthly basis or an yearly basis, and we get a premium support from Microsoft, okay, in order to get that. Okay. So that's basically kind of an options available. So when you want to use an Azure, you can choose. Maybe some customers will start with a pay as you go with a credit card when they want to create like a few set of resources in Azure. Maybe when they scale larger on Azure, then they go with the Microsoft reseller, because a $30,000 or a $60,000 or a payment of 50 lakhs or 60 lakhs through a credit card may not be possible. And so we go to the Microsoft reseller and we say that, okay, we are going to add you as an authorized reseller. We bill it to you, bill it to us, and you pay to the Microsoft. Maybe if still I see that there is a growth in my consumption of resources, then I go to the Microsoft and negotiate with an enterprise agreement, and I get a better discount on these resources. So that's the payment options or billing options where you have. And Microsoft, when you talk about from a perspective and compliance, Azure compliance, we call it as okay. What does this compliance? Now, a lot of requirements from the regulatories. So people say that your data center should be an ISO 27000 certified. You have to follow HIPAA compliances. You have to follow SOC compliances. Okay. You have to follow the PHA compliances. Like there are so many regulatories and compliance requirements from various countries. Now, the data centers are being provided and maintained by Microsoft Azure. Now, who has to certify the data center? It's Microsoft. They have 58 plus, I'd say, called as in compliance offerings, plus compliance offerings. So what does that mean by 58 plus compliance offerings? Means, so they say that the data centers have been compliant with ISO 27001, SOC compliant, and PCI standards, HIPAA standards. The backend infrastructure is being meets these compliance requirements, but the resources which you create on top of the data centers should comply with these standards, because that is not controlled by a Microsoft. That is not controlled by a Microsoft. Like that, there are so many, maybe industry related, regional related. As I said, India has their own regulatories, UK has their own regulatory compliance requirements, US has their own, industry specific, like healthcare has different, manufacturing sector has different, okay, and chemical industry has different requirements, government regulatories, like US government has different regulatories, UK government has different regulatories, like in Middle East governments have different requirements. So the data centers which are being kept in the specific geographical regions, they comply with this particular compliances and use that. Okay. So that's the basically what is an Azure. Okay. So in the next lesson, so we'll try to understand the Azure global infrastructure. So how the Microsoft Azure has built the data centers and what are the benefits and what are those terminologies called as regions, locations, and something called as an availability zones.